Thanks so much
Hi.
for joining me. I'm so excited to be offering this material. This is it's my life practice, really. And to be able to delve this out to all of you here this evening live, and those of you that are going to be watching this later, I'm just really happy to be here. So my name is Evan. I recognize so many of your names. So it's really nice to actually put a face to a name, because we're living in such a crazy virtual world. I've taught public classes for about 12 years now, and this year has been crazy because I've stopped teaching publicly in Aspen. So a part of me is definitely craving that connection with my students. So it's good to see you all. So feel free to share in the chat at any time. I mean, I know some people are more private, but I'll tell you all about myself and diabetes. But I'd like to know if anyone wants to let me know what type of diabetes they have, just so I have an idea of the group I'm speaking to. I'm assuming the majority of us are working with autoimmune diabetes, type 1 or LADA. Yeah, but I know a few people have type 2 as well. Type 1 since 5, wow. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little bit of a screen share. Not a little bit, I exaggerate. This is going to be, okay. Type 1 for 50 years, that's right, Cindy, I remember you saying that to me. Share screen. 1985, but I still have technology difficulties here. Okay, can you guys see that all right? Play from the start. Okay, well, welcome to this is the first of many diabetes master classes. And today's practice, we'll call it a practice because it's really an experiential lecture that we're going to be going through over the next hour, is to teach you about how to become more empowered in your personal sadhana, your personal practice, and how to create, implement, and sustain a personal practice for living with diabetes, whichever type of diabetes that you may have. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name's Evan. It's not Yvonne. My parents were kind of obsessed with the name Evan, regardless if I were a boy or a girl. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, but I've grown up in Aspen, Colorado since the age of 8. And I've been type 1 since 1998. And I've been teaching yoga since 2006, but I've been certified as a yoga therapist since 2015. And I'm certified in Vinyasa, Para Yoga, and I was recently initiated several years ago in the Sri Vidya tradition of the Himalayan Institute. And I'm the founder of Soroka Yoga Therapy here in Aspen, and the author of Yoga Therapy for Diabetes, which is going to be coming out in February of this coming year. Yay, 2021. I'm sure you guys are all ready for 2020 to be over, but I am too. This has been a great year of working really hard, and I'm ready to see the work come to fruition. So I run one-on-one yoga therapy practices for diabetes. I have a resilience retreat I'll talk to you about in a little bit that's coming up soon, and the Rise Above Diabetes training, which I do annually, which is what my book is based off of. And really my mission this evening and always is to advance and inspire people with diabetes to proactively and compassionately take charge of their condition with the holistic practices of yoga and Ayurveda backed by science and psychology. For me, it's really important that we're combining both the Eastern and Western traditions to complete a practice. So today's objective is quite a bit. I have a tendency to have very lofty goals for my classes. There's quite a bit of information. But I want you to have an experience. And at first I was going to do the lecture, but then last minute I decided that we're going to do our meditation first, because it's the end of the day. We have a lot on our minds. I want to clear the space and prepare you to set an intention so that you receive this material not only cognitively, but through your heart, through your lived experience of a human to this point, but also a person who has lived with diabetes. And we're going to talk about the definition of self-practice and how to understand its role in diabetes management. I firmly believe that it is the missing link in diabetes care, and I'm going to tell you why and really how to create, implement, and sustain self-practices in your life with whatever type of diabetes that you're living with. And we're going to go over some of my top recommendations for your type of diabetes. It sounds like most of us are type 1, so I will focus mostly in that direction. And then I've got a really awesome big announcement. I've been waiting for almost 2 years to announce this, so I'm happy you're going to be doing it live. And then I want to leave some time for Q&A to see if you guys have any questions specifically. Okay, so let's dive into a little mini meditation. Sound good? Oh, Jeannie, type 1 since May, so really recently. Wow. It's good that you're diving in now, diving into these practices now. When I was first started my trainings, I was always the youngest person in the room, and everyone always said to me, "Oh, I wish I would have known what you know now, earlier." But it's really great that you're diving in so soon. So congratulations. So how many of you have a meditation practice? You can just I think that there's a way to do a thumbs up somewhere, or you could just put in the chat yes or no, or raise your hand. Let's see, Karina, yes. Oh, hey, Megan, I didn't see you come in. Hey. Courtney, I see your legs. Rena, I assume that we're good. And Cindy, we're good. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to teach you a technique. I think it works no matter what, whether this is your first time meditating or whether you've had a sustained practice for 15, 20 years. This is a technique that was passed down to me through my teachers, Yoga Rupa Rod Stryker, and his teacher's teacher, who was Swami Rama, and Pandit Rajmani of the Himalayan Institute. And it's a basic third eye meditation strategy. I'm a huge meditator. I have a daily sadhana, and I honestly feel that more so than asana, more so than any of the other practices that we can relate to yoga, meditation is the most transformative aspect of what we can be doing on a daily basis, especially for diabetes. And we'll go over why. But this technique is really unique and special because it allows you to start to drop into a calm, spacious, present awareness, which is essential with diabetes. We have to make so many decisions throughout our day. And the more that we can abide in a place of spacious awareness rather than identified with the experience of what we're feeling, whether it's a blood sugar fluctuation or it's just a number on a screen. I think we're all exhausted by the numbers on screens. The more that we can be present in the moment, the tools that we learn through our meditation practice, they translate directly into our experience of managing diabetes. So this technique, it's a focus on the breath. We often hear the word prana in yogic terminology. Prana is our life force. And the best way to conceive of prana is the feeling or the experience of our breath. This is what directly links us into the present moment. It links us into our power, but more so than anything, it's what establishes our mind in presence. And because our minds are under the influence of so much psychologically and physiologically due to diabetes and life circumstance, this focus on the breath, and we're going to focus on this place of the nostrils, which is really the entry point, and this area, we'll call this the third eye center. But even deeper than that, it's the midbrain. And if you look at the structure of our brains, just the neuroanatomy of our brain, the very center of our brain, both functionally and structurally, is the doorway in between our impulses and basically our cognitive reasoning. So by being able to establish ourselves in our meditation in this place and begin to direct our breath there, we begin to calm, let's call it like this control panel that's between our impulses and our higher cognitive reasoning. We begin to be able to modulate that control panel in a direction of choice. And even when our minds are chaotic, which they tend to be, I'll remind you that the goal of meditation is not necessarily to quiet our minds, but it's really just to be able to bear witness to what is. And through consistent practice, this is what begins to trickle into our lives, whether we're directly applying the practices for diabetes specifically, or if it's for something much bigger, like life. I truly believe that diabetes is like a doorway, an entry point for just becoming really good at life. I'm sure a lot of you could concur that, right? So the way that this goes is we've got the nostrils, the right and left nostril, and these are the entry points where air is going to flow. So we're just going to pay attention on the flow, moving in and out, and I'm going to bring attention to this point, especially in the midbrain, but we're also going to focus the space between the eyebrows, the inner eyes, and right here at the entry point. So it creates kind of this triangular-like shape. And so I'll direct you through it, but what I want to remind you and establish you in before we even do this is that just focusing on your breath flow here, and you put a timer on for 15 minutes, that could be a very profound practice. It is ancient technology, and if you just sit with it and you allow it to do the work, that's all you need. So if you take one thing out of this hour that we have together, it's that's all you need. Granted, we need more help along the way, but if you keep coming back to that, that's a very profound meditation strategy and technique. Okay, are you guys ready? This is just going to be like maybe 10, 15 minutes. My husband says I have a really bad perception of time, so it might be a little bit longer. Whatever. All right, so let's get established in a comfortable seated position. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, please. Take a few smooth, lingering breaths. Establish yourself in the moment. The breath helps you arrive. Now begin to consciously deepen and lengthen your breath. Feel the shape change of your conscious breath, expanding your abdomen, and the rib cage, even up to the collarbone. And on the exhale, contract your abdomen and slowly, progressively empty your lungs. So this is called Ujjayi breath. It's a little bit of a sound to the flow. Notice the terrain of your inner experience at this moment. There's like an after effect of your day. Of this week. This year. Smooth out any choppiness or strain in your breathing. So you're consciously shaping the breath, but not forcing it. The moment we force the breath, it creates tension both in the body and the mind. So notice if there's anywhere in your breathing pattern that you can soften. Now, please lengthen your breaths to about 50% of what you would think would be your maximum, or what would rather feel like your maximum. Now to 75%. To your comfortable maximum. It feels like your comfortable threshold of inhale and exhale. Again, no forcing, just awareness and ease. Please sustain this comfortable maximum for 5 rounds of breath. Go ahead and count them. Now to 75% of your comfortable maximum. %50. 25%, so half of what you're breathing. Just let it become very subtle. To half of that. Now the breath is nearly internalized, so subtle, so smooth. If you were looking at your body, you could barely see the shape change, but you can feel it. Now to a breath that is barely there. Relax. No try. Just effortlessness. Now please relax the shaping of your breath. And this is distinct. Just let your breath become established in its natural flow and rhythm. And the moment this occurs, shift your attention to the tip of your nose, to the entry point at the right and left nostril. Recognize there's a distinct sensation there. A feeling, especially on the inhale, Watch as the breath enters both the right and left nostril simultaneously. And descends, returning to the origin point just below the nostrils. No trying, just effortless awareness. Experience the breath rise up to the ceiling of your nose. As it does on the inhale, there is a joyous sensation, expansive and spacious. Continue to relax. Allow the flow of the breath to direct the mind's attention. You're not trying to arrive anywhere in particular. Conceive of these two streams, the right and left nostril, like sacred channels of awareness, expanding up past the septum and now rising up to the space in the corners of your eyes. As the body exhales, awareness descends from the corners of the eyes back to the origin point below the nostrils. In a way, it's like prana, or the very sensation of your breath is inundating your eyes, flooding them with pranic awareness and light and presence. The eyes begin to relax in, slightly back. Now to the space between the eyebrows. Follow the breath up. Concentrated between the eyebrows. Presence. Light, however you conceive of it. A sensation, maybe an image. It's like you're breathing back into the brain. Now experience the two channels coalescing past the forehead, directly in the middle of your brain. With each progressive natural inhale, this presence, prana and light, builds, expands greater and greater. Calming and soothing the mind's thoughts, processes. And becoming more and more established in the present moment. Now, as you surrender effort, control, you'll begin to sense that this presence becomes even brighter and concentrated just in the brain. And it's as if the brain is breathing for you, that the breath is contained in the middle of the brain. Experiencing an expansion on the natural inhale of this presence and an absorption on the natural exhale. See it, feel it, however you experience it, but continue to relax into it. Breath and presence in the third eye. Now please relax. Take a few deep, full breaths. And before you come back, please consider the following. Why are you here? Are you here for this session with me this evening? What is it that you hope to learn? And what are you open to receiving? And please begin to rub your hands together. Build some warmth and friction. And you can take your hands and cover your eyes. Open and close your eyes a few times. Whenever you're ready, slowly come back. How do you guys feel? Just 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. It's doable, right? Breathing, focal point. Our minds need something to focus on in order to access higher states of consciousness. It's just, we can't ask it to go there without, in a way, influencing its focus. I wish we had more time to stay there, because I would like to stay there for even longer. But if you guys join me on Sunday, I'm going to be doing a 2-week meditation series. It's free. It's every day. I'll be guiding you through a similar meditation. Why not now during the holidays to start a daily practice? So let's kick off into this PowerPoint, because there's some juicy information. Oops. Let's see, I got to share the screen. Okay, thank you for your patience. All right. So this is kind of a sketch of more or less the idea of what we're working with here with these two channels at the tip of the nose and then the third eye. Obviously, it's a little bit deeper than what we just did. Let's get right into the issue. Why am I here? I am here because 50% of people with type 2 and type 1 cannot achieve the ADA's recommendations for A1C of under 7%. I think it says that it's about 7% for adults with type 1, 7.5 for youths. About half of people with type 2 meet those requirements, and it looks like about half of adults with type 1 are able to meet the criteria for glycemic targets. It's about even less for youth and young adults. I honestly, I don't remember very much of being a young adult with diabetes. I remember it was hard, but I really don't remember much of like how I was doing it. It just seems like this is what I'm doing now. So it's challenging, you know, especially kids. Like friends matter, being a kid matters, and it should matter, but it becomes very challenging. So I don't specialize in working with children, but these are tools and techniques that could really help kids and teenagers, especially that are having a hard time with the emotional side of diabetes. So the A1C, look, A1C should be under 7%. This is an important metric for offsetting diabetes risk factors like, you know, comorbidities and mental health issues. But it's not just that. Even with optimal A1Cs, many people are at risk of developing anxiety disorders, depressive disorders. I think the statistics are also about 50% for both type 1s and type 2s for clinically developing anxiety and depression both equally. And there's a lot of research out there whether depression comes first, you know, especially with type 2, but I'm not going to go into that. That's we don't have time for that today. But let's just say that there is definitely a huge correlation, and that it's also about quality of people's lives when there are mental health problems. Anxiety and depression are one of them. We're looking at a reduction in quality of life and longevity over the long duration of our lives with diabetes. So it's very important that we're working with this. And the other statistic that I find really important, and it's a big part of the book that's coming out in February, is, you know, despite all these amazing technological advancements, the numbers remain at about 50% of people that are able to adhere to these guidelines. So my big question for you, and the question that I keep asking is why? Why is this? And here are some reasons that I've come up with. Maybe you can add some later for me. But number one is that diabetes is a self-care disease. It's managed for the individual by the individual. There's not a moment where we go to the doctor's office, they give us a pill, and then they're like, all right, take this pill, and then you're good to go. No, diabetes scope, it's multidimensional. It impacts our anatomy, our physiology. It impacts our energy, which is very much related to our physiology, our mind, our perceptions, our behaviors, and in effect, our spirit. So I'm looking at this, and yoga therapy and Ayurveda look at the individual as a multidimensional being, not just as a singular disease. And Western medicine often views diabetes, the disease versus the illness. And I really find this like a really great distinction, is that the difference between a disease and the illness is that the illness is the experience of the disease within a person. Diabetes in me, type 1 in me, is going to look different in type 1 in you, depending on our life history, how we're living our life every day, stage of life, duration of diabetes, etc. There's so much going on, and we can't look at it as a singular unit. So there's so much variety, and that's why I feel like yoga and Ayurveda, the support of both, really help us to start to look at diabetes in a whole different way. And unless we can change the source of our suffering, whether that's diabetes, as our struggle with diabetes, our behaviors, our thoughts, our attitudes about diabetes, our relationship to diabetes will remain the same. In the Yoga Sutras, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but it's basically the manual of yoga written by Patanjali I think it's about 3,000 years ago. Sutra number 16 is Hayam Dukam Anagatam, and this is one of my favorite sutras, and it basically means that all the suffering in existence can be avoided. And the way that we avoid future suffering is through self-practice, it's through sadhana. So the result of all of the challenges that go along with diabetes, unmanaged A1Cs, but not only that, it's really stress. It's this furrowing of our protective processes. Allostasis is our body's innate ability to adapt and to adjust to changes. Unfortunately, over time, if our bodies are adapting and adjusting to changes, it's not always the right kind of adjustments. So over time, this resilience, we call it, it begins to break. And that's why self-care, self-practice is such an essential thing, is because it helps us restore our strength. It helps us restore this rope that ties everything together. I think of our DNA and genetics, like the telomeres are like the shoelace cap at the end of our genes. And so depending on our own natural predispositions, but our lifestyle and these kinds of things, they can begin to unravel these edges and open up our genetics predispositions to things. So if we already have something like an autoimmune condition and that we're burning the candle at both ends, as my father likes to say, we're starting to chip away at these protective processes that are naturally in place, because our body wants to heal, but if we're not giving it an opportunity to heal, it begins to break. So people need effective strategies to overcome their habits, to feel empowered and inspired to take care of diabetes from a place of love. And this is a love of life, an innate curiosity of life, and the sanctity of the life that we have, instead of obligation. And this is huge. And this is what self-practice teaches us, is that we're no longer treating diabetes out of obligation, but out of pure love of the life that we have. So I feel that the answer to perhaps the missing link is a better way of saying it, to filling this void, this gap, in getting more people to be not only A1C compliant, but also improve their quality of life, feeling more resilient and capable of managing diabetes, is through self-practice. Self-practice is a way that you can change the way you feel in the short term, as I'm sure you could experience in just 15 minutes of practice. Perhaps you felt more present, more aware, more alive, more in tune, but also in the long term, over the long duration of our lives. Practice helps us put the brakes on the stress response. And we do this by down-regulating our autonomic nervous system. And as I mentioned before in the beginning of this practice about the control panel in the midbrain, if we look at the neuroanatomy, and I know I'm going through this really fast, but the limbic system is that entry point, both structurally and functionally, that connects our higher cognitive function and processes with our nervous system. So if we can train our nervous system to calm down, to reduce stress, that we will not perceive things as such high threats, and that we'll be able to respond better. We'll be able to develop willpower, discernment, and adaptive skills when it comes to diabetes, because if you've been living with this long enough, you know that you start doing one thing and it works for a while, but all of a sudden something can change. And it's mostly women here in this group. We've got our hormonal cycles, things change just like that. We've got to be able to adapt quickly and not be so attached to what is not working. So as I mentioned prior, and I really want to hone in on this, it's this cultivation of meaning in the act of self-care. The more we can put meaning into the act of taking care of ourselves with diabetes and implementing practice strategies, the more love that we can put into our experience of this life that we have with diabetes. So it's so much more than an A1C, although an A1C is just one part of it, and it is a helpful metric, although it's not the most important. And so I'm talking about Ayurveda, which is a sister science to yoga, and yoga, which is partly a philosophy and a practice. And these two things combined create a mode, let's call it, like a pathway for us to live in right relationship within ourselves, with diabetes, with the environment, with all the changes that are going on inside of us and outside of us. So I like to think of self-practice as a flotation device in a sea of constant turbulence and change. Remember how I said that suffering can be avoided? It can be avoided when we have protective processes that help us feel better in the short term, whether that's feeling better or changing some sort of blood sugar extreme. Like if you have a practice that's going to help you get your blood sugars to come down or to improve insulin sensitivity, or if you have low energy from whether it's hyperglycemia or hypoglycemia, or it's an acute anxiety attack that you're having or depression, these kinds of things, you can start to feel better now. And then over the long duration of consistent practice, these practices create protection and longevity. So this helps us reduce the risk of diabetes and other life changes and circumstances by increasing the protective coating. You know how we had that image of that rope that was fraying? It helps us increase the protective mechanisms that allow us to bounce back quickly. So when something bad happens, whether that's a blood glucose or, you forget some important diabetes supply when you're 3 hours away. I just did that like 2 weeks ago. It was so silly that you don't get so stressed out, and that you're able to adapt and respond from a place of balance. So if you look at any like diabetes health manual, they're going to probably tell you that there's certain pillars for diabetes health. And I would say that these pillars probably work, they translate to all health, but we're using them specific to diabetes. One would be diabetes management. I'm actually calibrating right now my sensor. So I'm literally testing my blood sugar right now as I'm doing this lecture. We've got to be able to live life and manage diabetes simultaneously. In addition to that, nutrition, eating right, exercise, of course, energy management, mental health, stress reduction, and sleep. So there's specialists that can help you with diabetes management, with nutrition, with exercise. I mean, these are all really readily accessible things. But all of these specialists are going to tell you that you need to work on your energy management, that you need to work on stress reduction and improving your sleep. But they're going to give you suggestions, but they're not necessarily going to give you the how to do it. And I really feel that yoga and the programming that I'm creating is going to help you with those latter three. Also, the other ones, it will start to trickle into, but with energy management especially, and stress reduction, and of course sleep, they're very much intertwined. So self-practice is self-care. They are the same. Self-care, if you look it up on Wikipedia, is the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. It's empowering you to do that for yourself. And the practice, another definition is, it's also a practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. So I'm not talking about, Netflixing for several hours, although I just had back surgery last month, and I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that I didn't sit there and watch The Crown in one day. I definitely did that. And so, that was a slight catharsis, but self-care, it's a little bit more proactive, and you're seeing this in the wording. It's active, it's intentional, it's not passive. I feel that there are certain qualities as the result of self-practice. And these are my essential pillars for diabetes health. One is awareness. Self-awareness is huge. Two is adaptation. We want to be able to change the way we feel in real time. If I'm having a bad day because of blood sugars, I'm all over the place, or I'm roller coastering and I've got an important meeting to get to. What if I did 15 minutes of practice, and even if it didn't get my blood sugars to completely correct themselves, that I had more energy to be present for what matters most? That is one level of adaptation, also known as self-regulation, but it's also your ability to just be more resilient in the face of changes, change the way you feel now in the short term for the long-term benefit. And then efficacy is huge. Studies show that people with diabetes do so much better if they feel that they can handle it. The people that feel that they can't handle it, whether it's a child or even an adult, look, it gets you down. But if you feel that more over than not that you can handle any challenge that diabetes throws at you, even if you mess it up, that you can get back on the horse and you're more willing to try and experiment rather than getting locked down into this kind of fear response of like, well, I can't do it. The people that feel more efficacious, those are the ones that are able to rise above diabetes and have a higher quality of life. And the overall result of this is mastery. And I'm not just talking about diabetes mastery, because bottom line, that's impossible. I'm talking about life mastery, that we're using this challenge of diabetes as an entry point to see our whole life in a whole different perspective and to be more empowered to live it and not squander it. These are my main tools for self-practice, and this is coming from yoga. I'm sure we could look at self-practice in so many other ways, like, walking is a great strategy, journaling, but this is coming directly from my tradition as a Vini yoga therapist, is implementing some type of movement, breath. As you were able to see, we did just a very simple breathing exercise where we found a breath that felt good. We expanded it to 50%, 75%, and then almost completely full. And then we waned it down to a point where we weren't even focusing on trying to shape the breath, but we were still aware of the breath. That is huge. That is one of your best strategies you have for training your nervous system to create more balance through your autonomic responses. Deep relaxation like yoga nidra. Coming up in January, I have the resilience retreat, and we're going to be focusing mostly on yoga nidra for this retreat. Yoga nidra is besides meditation and breathing, it's my go-to. I do it every day, and I found that it has taught me how to be present in the most challenging of circumstances with diabetes. I think of like severe hypoglycemia, where it is just so scary. How can you be present and witness it and then respond appropriately, even when, the synapses in your brain are not connecting. So that's a huge tool. Meditation, of course. And then this last element, which is self-inquiry. There's no sense in doing all these practices unless we're inquiring about our thoughts, our behaviors, our emotions. It's through these practices that we have these aha moments where we're able to witness these things of, well, maybe I don't need to think that way. Maybe that's not true. Or maybe that experience that I'm feeling, that emotion, is because my blood sugars are a certain way, and maybe I can communicate better. Or maybe, that thing that I'm doing, which is taking insulin right at dinner, and then I'm waking up in the morning with my blood sugars at 300, maybe I need to take a different kind of bolus. So we're becoming more aware in these moments where we're giving ourselves time and space to connect, to look at diabetes, to look at a bigger picture of our whole lives and be more present. And then, like I mentioned, to be able to self-regulate and to adapt the way that we're doing diabetes. And we don't need a doctor to always tell us that. We should be able to do a lot of it for ourselves. So something I'm really interested in is, how do we spark? How do we spark this desire? I assume because you're listening to this right now, there's a part of you that is innately curious about change. My teacher's teacher is also Deskachar, who is the father or the son of Krishnamacharya, who is the person who brought yoga to the Western world. And one of my favorite quotes of him is that the first step of yoga is desire to be better. That's human. It's a desire to improve. And it's that desire to be better which sparks this innate curiosity. And it's what sustains our ability to show up in whatever that capacity is regularly for ourselves. So when it comes to designing a personal practice, there's a couple things I want you to think about. As I mentioned, inquiry is huge. So let's say you're showing up on your mat or whatever it is, your meditation cushion. And in those first few moments where you're breathing, you're checking in, you're finding a nice rhythm, you're just also inquiring. Our breath is one way of inquiring. What's going on? How does it feel in my body? What's out of balance? How can I bring things back to balance? And it doesn't have to, you don't have to have an answer. It's just putting it out there into the universe. What is out of balance? And then you're assessing what could potentially bring me back into balance, you know, and this could be during meditation. It could be in the moment of, you know, treating diabetes. It could be during exercise. It could be anything. You're inquiring, you're assessing, and then you're acting. The acting of the personal practice, the one thing that I really highly recommend, and I cannot strain enough, is to pick one thing and repeat it consistently. It's like life. I have a lot of friends, you know, I'm a millennial, and a lot of us just, I think, due to circumstances, we picked one thing to do early on, and then we changed to something else, and we changed to something else. And by the time we're, you know, 40, we don't really have a career. We've tried so many different things. The same thing goes with a personal practice, is that yes, it can evolve over time, but bottom line, if you're trying something new every day when it comes to practice, you're never really going to become established in the direct experience of creating something for yourself. So if you want to pick something, whether it's going to a yoga class, probably not going to yoga class these days, but, you know, doing a yoga class at home, or breathing practice, or meditation, or combining one of the two together, two of them together as a practice, and setting that up for 40 days. Science shows that 40 days is a great duration for someone to set up a new habit pattern. Okay, I think this might be a little bit out of order, but we'll start here because I'm realizing we don't have much time left. And I wanted to go over some really baseline things to start to conceive of with your practice for specific diabetes concerns. And I go over this stuff in much more depth in the Rise Above program, especially. But let's look at hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia as examples of what's going on and how you can start to even conceive of a practice in real time. So hyperglycemia, we've got a couple different things, you know, we've got longer term and short term hyperglycemia. Insulin resistance it tends to be more longer term, especially like for type 2 diabetes, for instance, but type 1s, we can definitely experience insulin resistance to the insulin that we inject. There's so many different reasons behind it, but we can do a practice at times that's going to help downregulate the nervous system in a way that reduces the stress hormones that increase insulin resistance, but also practice in a balanced way that's going to help our muscles uptake that extra glucose, help that insulin enter the cells and uptake glucose from our bloodstream. And we most commonly know this as exercise, but we all also know that intense exercise, although it can bring our blood sugars down, it also releases the same stress hormones that are responsible for insulin resistance. So we can also get a spike after. So that's why specific yoga practices, and I have a bunch of these practices on Yoga International right now, the website that you can take. It's balanced. that it's not too intense. And that's what helps us kind of like smooth it out and get that insulin working again. Postprandial spikes are another thing. I would say exercise is probably a good one for that. You can do, an intense asana practice for like 15 minutes. And the cool thing that I like about that is that, you don't need a lot to get your blood sugars back down, especially if you've already injected insulin, of course. So, word of caution, I'm sure you've experienced if you start to exercise with insulin that you're running the risk of going low. And then the qualities of this, of working with hyperglycemia, is we want to stimulate and we want to also pacify, as I mentioned prior with the insulin resistance. So hypoglycemia is kind of the other spectrum of this. These are more lunar practices. We want to recover from severe lows. Also practice to increase our willpower to stay. Like when I was much younger, I didn't have the willpower when I was low, and I would eat the whole kitchen, and I really struggled with weight gain and then subsequent, hyperglycemia after the fact. So our ability to witness and respond appropriately, I've heard from a lot of people out there in the diabetes community saying that that's impossible to be able to have that willpower. I just completely disagree. I think that with practice, you can do anything. And then another thing, and this is a key point in my book, is working with interoceptive awareness. A huge thing that people struggle with over a longer duration of type 1 diabetes is an inability to sense their lows. The more we have experienced lows, the less sensitive we are to feeling them. Like when I was younger, I felt my lows around 75 and now it's 65, but I have clients that don't feel it until it's dangerously low. And so working with specific practices can potentially help us link with this interoceptive awareness as our ability to feel and to sense internally. And it's not always the specific adrenic symptoms of like sweat or hunger pangs. A lot of times it's something more subtle that we're feeling. And if we can start to link and clue into that, it really gives us an enormous leap. So we don't have to rely just on technology to tell us where we're at, that we really have that control. And so working with hypoglycemia, it's really about balancing, but also nourishing and bringing and pacifying. So we want to build ourselves back up after hypoglycemia. Although both conditions are extremely depleting, I would say hypoglycemia is more depleting in the immediate. So that's why a practice like yoga nidra would be amazing after hypoglycemia. But there's also science that says that hyperglycemia and yoga nidra work very well, because it helps to reduce the stress hormones that are underlying insulin resistance. Okay. And just briefly, the best way for us to influence is with breathing exercises. So inhaling is more activating and stimulating, where exhaling is more pacifying. The right nostril is more activating. It's the solar channel, where the left is more pacifying. So let's say, you really need to calm down. Focusing on exhale, left nostril is key, but if you need to build things back up, working on your inhale on the right nostril would be beneficial. Now, this is not, it's not always, exact. There's lots of in-betweens with it, but this is just kind of a generalized rule. Inhaling in the belly is more grounding and calming, whereas inhaling in your chest is more stimulating and activating. And so bottom line, at the end of the day, all this comes down to is Shraddha. Shraddha is faith. It's taking care in your practice, but it's really any act that's performed with sincerity and absolute conviction. So as long as you're doing these practices, anything you choose, you don't need to even know exactly how, but if you choose one thing to stick to it and you put this intentionality behind it that's sincere with absolute conviction, you're going to be receiving a benefit from it. And then I'm just going to focus on the type 1 diabetes because we're nearing our time here. Actually, we've neared our time. So I hope you guys have a few extra minutes because I really want to get into this. But I'll be brief. Is that, look, this is generalization, but some considerations for type 1 diabetes is that we're just more prone to anxiety. This is Vata dosha. According to Ayurveda, type 1 diabetes is a Vata disease. So working with pacifying anxiety, calming the nervous system is huge. Not to mention the advent of technology. I had an article in Yoga Journal last year about technology fatigue and diabetes. You can look it up on their website. And it's really about creating protective practices because we're just so overstimulated, not only with our cell phones, but just the fact that our whole livelihood is connected to a screen and we're getting buzzes in the middle of the night. So we're more prone to exhaustion. As I mentioned before, sensitizing ourselves to our lows. We can really benefit from balancing the autonomic nervous system. And rajas is the quality of the gunas, which is, it's an elemental quality of the mind that it's really, excess rajas is anxiety. And so as I gave you that third eye meditation, but also meditation on your navel is going to be very grounding and soothing. Type 2, it's more kaphic, it's earth, water. Type 2s have more of a tendency to be prone to depression, prone to inertia, insulin resistance, although these are things that can go both ways, type 1, type 2, but this is just a generalization. So we want brightening practices, focusing on the heart, also the third eye. I mean, balancing the autonomic nervous system is important, of course, because these are the hormones that they are released to help us restore balance, but also in excess, they are responsible for what makes diabetes, the causative factors behind diabetes, but also the aggravating factors behind diabetes. Okay, woo, big breath here. I'm actually surprised I was able to do that all in an hour, guys. So I'm really, really impressed with myself. So, I'm giving myself a mini applause. I threatened a big reveal for this. So you guys are going to be the first people to hear that my book is available. I know I'm not trying to sell you guys stuff, but I spent 2 years on this book, and it's the first book of any kind to create specific practices for the major challenges of diabetes. You can pre-order it on Amazon right now. I'm so proud of this book. I know it's going to change people's lives. This is for people with diabetes. It's people work with diabetes, for yoga teachers, it's for therapists, for psychologists. Heck, I hope it's for doctors because they could really, really benefit from all that I'm delving out in this book. So I hope you guys check it out. It's my baby, and if you like the material that we went over today, you're going to love this book because it's basically everything that we learned today, but 300 pages of it. Just so you guys know, starting on Sunday, I'm doing the free Meditate to Thrive challenge. So I hope you join me. I'll be doing daily practices of guiding you through it. It's not like in real time. I'm uploading it to my website so you can do it whenever you need. And then lastly, I've got my first ever resilience retreat. It's virtual. It's not a full day practice. We've got 3 mini practices from January 8th through 10th. And we're going to be focusing on yoga nidra and meditation. You're basically going to lie there and just receive. So I know that, with type 1, we're constantly doing. So it's just going to be really nice to just receive. So you can go to my website if you want to do any of those things. So, woo. I want to open up I know we've gone over about 4 minutes, but that's a lot of information. I hope you were able to absorb some of it. This is all recorded, so you're going to get this and you can revisit it. But I wanted to see if there were any questions that any of you may have in the last 5 minutes here. I'm happy to address anything. So you can open your mic. Thank you, Courtney. I can't wait to read it too. Actually, I've read it so much, I can't look at it anymore. I can't wait for you to read it. You can, if anyone has a question, you can open the mic, talk. It's totally fine, or type it in, and we'll go from there. How did it land? Does that make sense to your lived experience? Yes. Cool. Thanks, Rena. Yeah, lowering A1C, it's a struggle. But if we can start to look at it instead of just the number, but like I said, about this, it's really this will and desire to love and take care of ourselves from a place of meaning and purpose. That's really the answer, rather than the A1C in particular. That if we start to implement all these different things and address our practice daily, and take care of ourselves daily with love, that number is going to go down naturally. Okay. I guess that's it. I was hoping someone would ask a juicy question, but we'll leave it to the next one. Thank you guys so much. It's really a pleasure, and we'll be in touch soon. Bye.